Sunset in the mirrors, windows down, a full tank, and nowhere you have to be. Cars, highways, the open road, sold to us as freedom, practically a national religion. The whole American dream running on four wheels. Every classic road movie, every diner jukebox, every See the USA ad ever made is selling some version of that same picture, except almost nobody agrees on how we actually got here. Not historians, not the government. Especially not the government. They keep an entire webpage whose only job is correcting the story about their own highways. So what do they know that the rest of us don't? Rewind before any of this existed, and getting anywhere in America meant a horse, a wagon, and a prayer that it hadn't rained. Outside the cities, roads were dirt, mud in spring, dust in summer, ruts deep enough to swallow a wheel in between. A trip that takes you 20 minutes today could easily eat an entire afternoon. So who fought hardest to fix that? Not drivers. There were barely enough cars yet to matter. It was cyclists. In 1880, a coalition of bicycle clubs formed the League of American Wheelmen. Within a few years, their Good Roads magazine had over 1 million readers, all demanding better pavement for bicycles. One of their pamphlets, with a straight face, called it the Gospel of Good Roads. The automobile hadn't even shown up to its own origin story yet. By 1910, automobile clubs finally caught up and joined the fight the cyclists had already been winning for 2 decades. Even Theodore Roosevelt and Thomas Edison lent their names to the cause. For the next 30 years, cars would ride on political groundwork that cyclists built first. Then, Detroit changed the math. In 1908, Henry Ford's Model T rolled out at $850, a real stretch for a working family. Ford's real weapon sat underneath the car, the moving assembly line. By 1925, that same car cost $260. Car ownership stopped being a luxury and became a plan, which exposed a new problem. America now had the cars. It just didn't have anywhere decent to drive them. Enter a bicycle shop kid from Indiana named Carl Fisher, part engineer, part carnival barker, all nerve. This is a man who once rode a bicycle across a tightrope to advertise his shop, then later hung one of his own cars from a hot air balloon and floated it over Indianapolis as a publicity stunt for his car dealership. Fisher got rich selling headlights, co-founded the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, then decided the country needed a paved road running from New York to San Francisco. So in 1913, he just built one. Not with government money, with corporate money. Tire makers, cement companies, car manufacturers, all chipping in. Henry Ford, of all people, refused to donate a dime, reasoning that the public would never learn to fund good roads themselves if industry handed it to them for free. The Lincoln Highway opened later that year. Highway is generous. Long stretches were still gravel, sand, or bare dirt with a line of tar poured down the middle so drivers could find it in the dark. Before it, driving coast to coast took roughly 2 months. Even the Lincoln Highway Association's own guide, a few years later, only promised drivers a sporting proposition of 20 to 30 days, still a real adventure, just a shorter one. Fisher wasn't done. Oh no. He turned around and built a second road, the Dixie Highway, running from Michigan all the way down to his next project. A drained Florida swamp he was about to call Miami Beach once advertised with a billboard in a snowed-in Times Square that just read, "It's June in Miami Beach." He died broke in 1939, and he was refreshingly honest about the road trip mythology he'd helped invent. It was never a dream, he once said. He could have just as easily started a cattle ranch. Hold on to him. He's going to matter again. By 1926, the country had enough named roads for Route 66, 2,448 miles from Chicago to Santa Monica, laid down mostly for farmers hauling crops to market, not for tourists. Then, the Dust Bowl hit, and Route 66 became something else entirely, an escape hatch. Roughly 200,000 people fled ruined farmland along it, which is exactly what John Steinbeck was describing when he gave the highway its nickname in The Grapes of Wrath, the Mother Road. Just 7 years later, a chart-topping Bobby Troop tune had already rebranded the same stretch of asphalt as pure adventure. Same road. Completely different story, depending on the decade you asked. Out of that desperation, oddly, came the whole aesthetic of the American road trip. Yes, diners with neon signs. Filling stations flying the colors of Texaco and Standard Oil like flags planted in enemy territory. And in December 1925, on the main coastal road in San Luis Obispo, California, an architect named Arthur Heinemann opened a chain of roadside cabins called the Milestone Motel. He'd wanted Millstone Motor Hotel on the roof sign, but the letters wouldn't fit. He never trademarked the shortened version. Every competitor copied it for free. Motel entered the dictionary anyway. 8 years later, Richard Hollingshead, a sales manager at his father's auto products company, reportedly got tired of watching his mother squirm in cramped movie theater seats. So he nailed a screen to a tree in his backyard and pointed his car's headlights at it. In June 1933, his drive-in theater opened outside Camden, New Jersey. 25 cents a car, 25 cents a head. By the 1930s, America already had its road trip iconography fully built, decades before the interstate highway system existed at all. Which brings us back to that Indiana promoter we told you to remember, and to a young Army officer about to get humbled by his own country's roads. In the summer of 1919, Lieutenant Colonel Dwight Eisenhower joined a military convoy attempting something nobody had pulled off, driving from Washington, D.C. to San Francisco. 81 vehicles, 3,251 miles. It took 62 days. The convoy averaged 6 miles an hour, passing through some 350 towns along the way, with motorcycle scouts riding ahead to check whether the road up next was even still there. Trucks sank in mud to their axles. Bridges gave out underneath them. The Army logged 230 separate breakdowns and accidents, and its own official report concluded that America's roads were absolutely incapable of meeting the present-day traffic requirements. Eisenhower put it more simply: the roads varied from average to non-existent. That trip planted a seed. A second experience, decades later, watered it. As Supreme Allied Commander crossing a shattered Germany in 1945, Eisenhower saw the Autobahn, wide, smooth, uninterrupted highway, still intact and functioning, now helping his own army resupply itself as it chased a collapsing Nazi front. He never forgot it. So when President Eisenhower pushed Congress to fund a massive new highway network, culminating in the Federal Aid Highway Act of 1956, the story basically writes itself. Right? Traumatized soldier sees Germany's superhighways, builds America's version for the Cold War, in case the Soviets attack and cities need evacuating fast. This was the era of backyard bomb shelters and duck-and-cover drills in classrooms, when a plan for evacuating whole cities sounded less like paranoia and more like common sense. It's a great story. It's also, according to the US government's own highway historians, mostly wrong. Eisenhower didn't invent the interstate system. The route map existed before he was even in politics, sketched out in a dry 1939 government report called Toll Roads and Free Roads, legally authorized by Congress in 1944 and largely finalized on paper by 1955, a full year before Eisenhower signed anything at all. And despite the name Congress bolted onto the bill, the National System of Interstate and Defense Highways, the Federal Highway Administration states outright that the primary justifications for the interstate system were civilian in nature: economic growth, traffic safety, congestion relief, fewer lawsuits. The Cold War simply made for better marketing than congestion relief, so Congress tacked on defense, and the legend took it from there. While we're correcting the record, no! 1 mile in every 5 was never engineered ramrod straight, so bombers could land on it in a war. That one's been on the Federal Highway Administration's own myth page for years, and it still won't die. Planes have landed on interstates in genuine emergencies exactly 0 times by design, plenty of times by accident, which is a very different thing. The most American road system ever built, it turns out, came less from one visionary's master plan and more from decades of unglamorous bureaucracy, wearing a war hero's name. It also took until 1992 to call the whole thing finished at a final cost of $128.9 billion, roughly 5 times what Congress was originally promised back in 1956. By the government's own reckoning, it remains the largest public works project in American history, all from a bill nobody could even agree on the reason for. But bureaucracy doesn't sell road trips. People do. Kemmons Wilson, a Memphis builder who in 1951 drove his wife and 5 kids to Washington and back, fuming the entire trip about filthy motels that charged extra for children. At the time, one newspaper estimate put the number of roadside lodgings across the whole country at around 20,000 and called most of them, politely, unappetizing. Wilson came home and built something better. The first Holiday Inn opened in Memphis that August. Air conditioning, a pool, a restaurant, kids stay free. 20 years later, there were over 1,400 of them. Come on, nobody in Congress ordered that. Ordinary Americans just took roads built for one set of reasons and used them for an entirely different one. By the 60s, the family road trip had turned into a full-blown rite of passage. Station wagons packed to the roofline, a cooler wedged in the back, kids keeping score of out-of-state license plates through the window. Howard Johnson's orange roofs and Stuckey's pecan log billboards became landmarks in their own right, spaced along the interstate almost like clockwork, exactly the way Washington's traffic engineers never actually planned for. Not everyone got to enjoy that freedom equally, though. Between 1957 and 1977, building the interstate system displaced more than 475,000 households, over 1 million people, by the federal government's own count. Planners routed highways through black neighborhoods again and again, often justified with blight labels that were themselves leftover residue from decades of redlining. In Washington, D.C., 2 interstate spurs alone displaced roughly 23,500 residents, most of them black. In Syracuse, New York, Interstate 81 was driven straight through the 15th Ward, uprooting more than 1,300 families from a thriving black community in one continuous stretch of construction. Meanwhile, wealthier and whiter neighborhoods in the very same cities were far more likely to get a highway rerouted around them entirely, or fought it off using tools, historic preservation status, political connections that poorer neighborhoods rarely had. Of course, you know this story. But here's the twist inside the twist. The road that built the legend of the American road trip didn't survive the system it helped inspire. Steinbeck's Mother Road, the highway that carried Dust Bowl refugees west and later carried honeymooners past every diner and drive-in in the country, got bypassed section by section, town by town, until it was formally wiped off the federal map on June 27, 1985. The towns along it didn't just lose a highway. Plenty of them lost their entire economy overnight the moment traffic started flowing somewhere else on the new interstate instead. So which version is true? The romantic one, where the open road was always about freedom, or the paranoid one, where it was secretly built to survive a nuclear war? I think that neither one. The real story is stranger than both. A bicycle club chasing smoother rides, a broke Miami promoter chasing publicity, a dry government report almost nobody has ever read, and a soldier who happened to be standing in the right place at the right time, twice. Even Fisher, the man who basically invented the idea of the Great American Road Trip, told you himself it was never a dream to begin with. We built the myth after we built the road. Not the other way around. And maybe that's the most American part of this whole story. Electric drivetrains, self-driving software, whole city councils now debating whether another new lane ever actually solves traffic or just moves the same argument a few miles down the road. It's the same fight in different clothes. What do we actually want the road to be for? Nobody fully agreed on the answer in 1956. Don't expect a clean one now, either. So, the Great American Road Trip never happened the way you think it did. I have a better question to end on. If we got this story wrong for 70 years, what else are we getting wrong right now while it's still happening? Drop your thoughts below. If you want more videos like this, subscribe. I put one out every week. The next one's right here.